RWBY, Volume 4, Episode 7, Punished. What happens? The episode starts with Oscar chilling in his room until Ozpin's voice gets his attention. Oscar and Ozpin talk for 4 minutes and then we cut to Weiss. She gets berated by her father and when she starts to fight back, he hits her. The argument continues and Jacques forbids Weiss from leaving the grounds and revokes her title of heiress to the Schnee Company, passing the title on to Whitley. Whitley reveals that he's an asshole to the surprise of no one and Weiss cries before deciding to do... something. Finally, we return to Ranger and Crow. Tyrion and Crow talk a bit about Salem and then begin to fight. Ren and Nora attempt to assist Crow, but are still no match for Tyrion. Crow warns the kids not to intervene, but RWBY decides she's hot shit and joins the fight anyway. The action grinds to a halt so RWBY can fail to shoot at Tyrion, and then Crow slowly walks to his weapon while Tyrion just stands around and lets him do that. The animators decide to give a shit again, and the battle resumes at an exciting pace. RWBY insists on joining the battle despite Crow's continuous warnings. This results in Crow having to protect RWBY, and while he's distracted, Tyrion lands a vital blow on Crow. RWBY cuts off part of Tyrion's tail. Tyrion then runs off and no one tries to stop him or capture him or anything. Crow is clearly very hurt and makes it clear that he's going to tell the kids about maidens. The pacing in this episode sucks fat dicks. Last episode ended by getting the viewer excited for the fight between Crow and Tyrion, and then this episode makes us wait 10 minutes until we actually get to see this fight. Why? It leaves the viewer anxious to get through Oscar and Weiss's scenes because we were promised a fight, but we were given 10 minutes of mandatory conversation to sit through first. Who the fuck thought it was a good idea to end the episode with the fight? If you watch these episodes back to back, it feels like they didn't know where to stick Oscar and Weiss's bits and shoved them randomly into an episode. There's no reason to cut it up. Oscar and Weiss's scenes have no bearing on the fight, and seeing the conversations they went through before the fight does nothing to alter the viewer's perspective of it. If either scene offered some information to the viewer that could change the way we feel about the fight, then it would make sense to interrupt the flow of Ranger's battle to let the audience know about it. But they don't. The only reason I can come up with for why they ended the episode with the fight is because they liked ending it on Crow's line of, "What's your favorite fairy tale?" It's just stupid to get the viewer excited for a scene, just to make them wait to see what you hyped them up for. Building tension is totally different from just cutting up combat. Tension is built when the viewer gets nervous or excited at the possibility of a big event. For example, tension is built when we see Ren and Nora hiding from the Nukkalavi. We're worried at the idea of them being found. But here the action has already started, the inciting incident being Tyrion's initial attack getting blocked by Crow. By cutting away, all you do is needlessly interrupt the action. And in an action anime, this is one of the worst things you can do! By cutting up the fight like this, you put the viewer in a situation where they are less willing to care about the scenes before the fight, because the expectation you gave wasn't followed up on, leading to a disappointed audience. The fight would have been mind-blowing, one of the best of the series overall, if it hadn't been cut up. Let's actually start talking about what happened this episode. Oscar's bit is really important and the voice acting is pretty good. But it's also really boring. If I watched this part with my eyes closed, I wouldn't miss out on any interesting or important visuals. His room looks nice, especially the bed, but the scene is filled with lackluster cinematography. I get it, having a character effectively talk to themselves for 4 minutes is tough to shoot interestingly, but that's a hurdle RT's gonna have to conquer if scenes like this are gonna become more common. I think the biggest problem is that Oscar's stuck in just his tiny room. The animators aren't given much to work with. If Oscar left his room and was able to continue this conversation as he got ready for dinner, then there would be more interesting ways to frame this conversation. Like having him wash his hands and use his reflection in the mirror to sort of act as our stand-in for Ozpin. They even kind of do this with his reflection in the window, but it's immediately dropped and Oscar just stands around aimlessly. Honestly, I think the scene would be most effective if it was outside. When Ozpin talks, we could focus on shots that include a lot of the sky. The stars would help drive home the magical aspect of the situation. When Oscar tries to take charge, the frame could be filled with the floor, representing how Oscar is trying to stay grounded in reality. When the scene ends, we could see Oscar on a clear horizon line, the screen split between this magical and grounded terrain. And Oscar stuck with the choice on which way to go. Should he stand his ground, or should he trust this mysterious voice in his head? The scene's weakest point is the fact that Oscar's locked in his room, leading to haphazard camera angles jumping around trying to keep it from looking too static. The uninspired cinematography hinders the scene overall, which is a shame since the script and acting is pretty good, but is bogged down by its boring visuals. Jacques' an asshole. What's your semblance? Compensating for your tiny dick by hitting your kids? The shot where Weiss gets slapped is actually really good. Seeing it in the mirror ties it into Weiss's songs. It's framed kinda low, but that's fine. It doesn't feel pushed out of the way or anything. This scene does a good job making the viewer hate Jacques. Even if we ignore the slap, his shitty attitude and imposing demeanor is infinitely more intimidating and loathable than his introduction. In episode 2, it felt like they really wanted to make Jacques seem like a bad guy. But by sticking him behind a desk, lower than Weiss, and having him complain like a child that things weren't going his way, just resulted in Jacques feeling like a brat. He spoke as if he was trying to be evil, like the bad guy for a kids' show. It's much more effective here, where he not only sounds like a real person, but the rules he lays down are something both the character and audience disagree with. Weiss may not have wanted to sing for some reason, but the audience still wanted to see it. Here we're in agreement with her. Jacques' punishment not only strips her of any power, but puts her in a situation that we don't want to see her in. We want her free and fighting with her friends, and Jacques is preventing that. It's a very effective scene, despite the fact that everything that happens in it could be seen from a mile away. I wasn't ever surprised by Weiss's story in this volume. I guess the schnees are just real easy to read. But even though it was predictable, it was still entertaining. Gold star. What? Whitley's a bad guy? I never would have guessed by his blatant shitty attitude and smug-ass clapping. Like, was it really supposed to be a surprise? It's so obvious. Why do shadows hate Whitley? His face looks so flat all the time, especially when he's looking straight into the camera. Where's his nose go? It's so distracting. It would help if he had some color to his face. Girls and Oscar get to have cute red cheeks, but like, dudes have red cheeks too. This results with the men in RWBY feeling flat. I get that it's supposed to be like an anime thing, but the girls have so much more depth to them that the guys all feel unimportant and unfinished. Ugh, the fight. Since we spent so long with Oscar and Weiss, it feels like Ranger and the gang have all been standing around in the same position for hours. Especially since time has clearly moved for Weiss between episodes. It's immediately immersion breaking. This is such a shitty camera angle. Tyrion's our focus, but he's tiny and in the background while Crow's sword blocks most of the screen. It even blocks our view of Tyrion's head as he bows. And then the whole top of the screen is just unused sky. With this shot, the whole screen is wasted. This is the shot. And this is the used space. Why? Having Tyrion interrupt Crow by attacking is really funny and unexpected. Great job. Okay, so this fight is ridiculously exciting. It looks great, sounds great, is choreographed great. That's why it's so mind-blowing that the RWBY crew shot themselves in the foot by cutting it up so bad. The wait between episodes isn't a problem, unless you just give us a dumb World of Remnant, like how they did, but that's not what we're talking about. But cutting up the fight with 2 whole scenes just breaks up the action when it didn't need to be. This whole Ranger situation, discovering Oniyuri, Tyrion attacking, Crow joining the fight, and Tyrion running would be one of the most interesting and well-paced story beats of the volume if it wasn't disjointed like this. That's what annoys me the most, that this potentially amazing sequence was distractingly ruined by this dumb decision to interrupt it like this. Bonus praise for Vic Mignogna here. His performance of Crow usually isn't anything special, but he really sells the worry here. It's nice. This whole bit with Crow punching Tyrion is really dumb. It's so slow! The action was fast-paced and adrenaline pumping, but stop! Watch Crow walk towards his sword, though. That's all Tyrion's doing. Just a couple punches and he has to sit around and just let Crow get his sword back. Slowly. Then we get some slow reaction face shots. Alright, back to the fun stuff! It's just like, what was the point?
Oh, Crow's so cool. I just want to look at him with a smug look on his face. That sounds like something we should put in the middle of this fight.
It's an action anime. If you stop the combat, there should be a reason. Also, what's RWBY doing up there? She's got a clear target on Tyrion and he's not moving. You insist on fighting even though you're the most hurt of the group, and yet, when you can be the most helpful, you just decide to stand around. No. You see, if RWBY did anything, then we wouldn't get to focus on Crow walking slowly. The show's protagonist is supposed to be RWBY, not Crow! Why do the writers seem so much more interested in focusing on every other character besides the one the show's named after? I listened to an interview of Jeff Williams once. He had mentioned that Carrie, the director, was nervous that people would be able to figure out Crow's semblance because of the lyrics in the song they play during this fight. Well, Carrie should know that there's nothing to worry about because the lyrics are impossible to understand.
It's
it doesn't help that there's a lot of voice acting and Foley over the song, but even just listening to the song alone is near impossible to understand. Jeff's lyrics are more pretend screamed than sang. It sounds like he's afraid to open his mouth too much, or like he's trying to really belt out the lyrics but is afraid of waking up the neighbors if he's being too loud. Jeff's a talented musician, and the rhythm for the song's good, but it's not sung well. Why don't the others try to stop RWBY from fighting? She's the one who's taken the most damage and is Tyrion's target. If he can grab her, he could just run off, and she's hurt enough to have her aura break, so why aren't they doing anything? And for that matter, why is RWBY doing something in the first place? She was incapacitated, incapable of running from Tyrion when he had tried to attack her, but now she's fine, I guess! All she needed was to sit on the floor for a couple of seconds and now she's up and fighting again. What? When a character's aura breaks, they are considered too hurt to continue fighting in a tournament. The Fall Maiden became helpless to attack when it happened to her, so why is RWBY just fine? She doesn't even seem hurt or anything. I'd be fine with RWBY joining the fight if it wasn't established that she was critically wounded just seconds ago. She's not even helpful. She just ends up distracting Crow and getting in the way. I thought that RWBY was going to learn that just because you can fight doesn't always necessarily mean that you should fight. She became a hindrance and a liability, and Crow wouldn't have gotten stabbed by Tyrion if he wasn't distracted by her. Things keep almost falling on her and stuff, and Crow keeps protecting her. She's not focused on her surroundings, and has become so tunnel-visioned that she doesn't notice that her friends aren't helping for a reason, and that Crow is spending more time protecting her than fighting the real threat. I figured it would be an interesting lesson for RWBY, to learn when to sit a fight out. But no, Crow's just bad luck. RWBY did nothing wrong. We're finally given the chance to see our title character grow since the first volume, but instead it's all just to glorify Crow's super edgy backstory. So, real scorpions can grow their tails back if it's lost. I hope this can also happen for Tyrion, otherwise they've handicapped a very interesting adversary after their first battle. It'd be more fun to watch our heroes grow to be able to take him on at full strength rather than strip him of half his combat abilities right away. Run after him! He's hurt! If he leaves, he can recover and come back with reinforcements! Attack and capture him! Don't just stand there, now's your chance! And so, that's Punished. This episode's biggest problem is its baffling structure. The scenes individually are all pretty good, if at times boring, but by keeping the audience waiting around for the promised action to start, the whole episode gets tainted by a sour twinge of anxiousness. The audience ends up getting annoyed that it's taking so long for the fighting to start, that it leaves the viewer seeing the interrupting scenes with a negative frame of mind, despite the fact that they're both important and well done for the most part. If the order went fight scene, Oscar scene, Weiss scene, about 70% of my problems with this episode would be resolved. Start with the promised fight and move on from Crow asking about fairy tales. Oscar's even reading a book. The viewer would want to connect Crow's line to Oscar's potential fairy tale book and prep us for a talk about important things like maidens and such. After the lull, we rise again during Weiss's scene and end with the knowledge that Weiss is about to start training with her sword. The fight wouldn't be interrupted, and the ending would be satisfying, as we end on one story beat as we make it clear that the next will begin soon. If you pay attention, from the previous episode on for this volume, almost every scene ends with some kind of stinger. What's your favorite fairy tale? Klein, I need a favor. Are you going to go look for your mom? Or your sister? We're gonna take the White Fang back. The first 5 episodes of the volume felt like they were written normally, with clear passage of time and intentional cuts between characters and scenes. From episode 6 and on, with the exception of Ren and Nora's backstory, it all feels randomly stitched together. It's like each character's arc was written out individually and was then cut up and strung together with no rhyme or reason. It feels like they were no longer writing episode scripts, but instead gluing together unconnected scenes and animating the show like that. And since they weren't writing clear episodes, they were never certain what scene would end the video. So instead of writing a satisfying ending for a planned out and well-paced episode, they just make sure every scene ends with a cliffhanger. Because of this, progression halts for everybody, and we got no satisfying conclusions for any of the 5 different arcs this volume until the last episode. And this cut-up, scene-by-scene style of storytelling resulted in an annoyingly paced episode with 3 unconnected bits of story. The poor directing of scene placement ruins what could have been a great episode. By keeping a promised fight that you hyped up for us tucked away at the end of the episode, you've left the fight feeling disjointed and the interrupting scenes feeling like a waste of time for our first viewing. We got excited last episode for a fight and had to wait 10 minutes out of a 16-minute episode to see it. You brought our hopes up, but didn't deliver on them until the episode was almost over, meaning the one who was punished the most were the viewers.